Okay, so you're on live on both. Okay, you can speak.
Good evening, my fellow Singaporeans. This is Tean after work. This is the first time I am going live on both Facebook, YouTube, and I hope it's going to be a success. But how was your day? I had a very, very busy day in court. I have just returned from court. It's a good thing that my in court. I have just returned from court. It's a good thing that my office is very near to court, and this is where I normally do all my after work shows. This is the meeting room in my office, and I hope to make this a regular feature, to do it at least once a week, and give you my take of what I think are the most important development uh, that has occurred during the week so far. But of course, this week has been taken up with the debates in Parliament on the President's address. All right. Yes, we are just going to just allow people to settle in now. Um, you know, but let me just give you a brief background as to the tradition behind the debate on the President's speech. Now, this evolves from tradition from the British Parliament, from the House of Commons, where an incoming government, after a general elections, will present what is known as the Queen's Speech. So in Britain, the Queen, being the head of state, will traditionally open Parliament, just like you saw the President open Parliament. All right. And at the opening of Parliament, she would read what is known as the Queen's Speech. And the Queen's Speech or the President's Speech is not drafted by either one of them. All right? It is drafted by the incoming government, and it basically sets out in very broad outlines what is their agenda for the next 5 years or the parliamentary term. And after that, Parliament will have a debate on the Queen's speech or the President's speech. Now, in Britain, in the Houses of Commons, in the House of Commons, the debate begins almost immediately. Here, our MPs are lucky. They have a 1 week break after listening to the President's speech, in which to write out their speeches on what they want to tell the public, on what they think of the President's speech. So this is the tradition that has evolved, and it kickstarts the parliamentary term. And of course, as you heard in the President's address, it was largely about jobs. And rightly, this issue has taken up the great bulk of parliamentary time this week. And I hope in this 1 hour show that I'm going to do with you today to give you my take on what the parliamentarians have said so far. Now, I think the hot topic of the day has to be the use by Lee Hsien Loong of the term free rider yesterday. All right. Everybody's talking about the free rider. Again, it is one of those insults that the PAP loves to throw out at opposition voters. Yeah. I made a post early this morning in which I have listed what I remember of the PAP insults. So in 2011, during the general elections, when Aljunied GRC was hotly contested, you had Lee Kuan Yew going onto the ground in the last few days and warning the voters there, saying that if the PAP lost Aljunied GRC, the voters would repent for the next 5 years. Well, I know a lot of you respect Lee Kuan Yew, I don't think that was a very clever thing for him to have said. All right. And I think that probably lost the PAP the first GRC, our unit GRC, because people don't like that. Yeah. And then, of course, in the last few years, you have had a series of gaffes from the PAP ministers. So in 2018, you had Goh Chok Tong telling a closed meeting that he thought those people who earn $500,000 and less were mediocres, who did not deserve, could not possibly amount to ministers. So was he suggesting that only those who earn more than 500,000 a year are qualified to be ministers? That appeared so. Of course, then, you had the lady from Yishun, what's her name? Lee Bi Hua, right? Calling Singaporeans si kui kia in Parliament. Singaporeans didn't take that well. Okay. And then, of course, this year, when COVID happened, in which the PAP performed abysmally. All right. I'm going to speak about that a lot in this show. You had Chan Chun Sing again tell a closed door meeting what he really thought of those who went on a buying binge, and he called them xia sui, disgraceful. Yeah. And of course, yesterday you had Lee Hsien Loong adding the latest insult, free rider. My friends, to give more, because every time they open their mouths, they are losing votes. All right. And I hope they keep insulting us, the opposition, and our voters. And it was disgraceful what Lee Hsien Loong said yesterday. The way he used the term a free rider suggested that it was opposition voters who wanted the best of both worlds, who still wanted a PAP government, but at the same time wanted an opposition MP or parliamentarian. How disillusioned can he be? How delusional can he be? He still has that mindset that Singaporeans think that without the PAP, this country will fall apart. But I can tell you, that is not how close to 40% of Singaporeans feel anymore. In fact, I'm very confident that 39%, close to 40%, that voted for the opposition this time, voted the way they did because they have had enough of the PAP and they want a change of government. And I was very heartened to read a Facebook post by a lady by the name of Lorraine Lee this morning. It was a short post, but she said basically, when I voted for the opposition, I voted for a change of government. So don't think that I was still voting for a PAP government. And I think that you have the same attitude, don't you? And 4 out of 10 Singaporeans now feel their lives will be better with a new government. Their lives, their future, the future of their next generation will be much better with a new opposition government. And I always tell people this. I said, the next time you vote the opposition into government, I can almost assure you, your lives are going to improve at least 10 times. Why do I say that? Because the PAP are stuck in a model that is at least 40 to 45 years old. and they cannot move out of that model. And so you have the same narrative being repeated decade after decade. When the world has changed, you know, this narrative that they have been repeating for the last 40 to 45 years became fashionable in the 80s. It is what I call the neoliberal narrative. And neoliberalism is that branch of political philosophy and political economics that believes that the more money you make, the better people are. They believe that if a person is poor, that person is morally deficient. And so they celebrate the rich. All right? They think that if a person is a billionaire, that person is morally superior. That was why a number of years ago, when people complained about the lack of, when people in Singapore complained about the gross inequality, what did Lee Hsien Loong say? Oh, if I had only have 10 more billionaires in this nation, we would all be better off. So neoliberalism is that political philosophy and political economy that believes that if you make the rich richer, it will trickle down to the rest of society. But you know something, my friends? All over the world now, neoliberalism is on the retreat. In many places in the world now, neoliberalism has been considered the greatest failure of the last 40 years. The great advocates for neoliberalism were Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. They were great politicians, but they came to power in the 80s when social democracy was thought to have failed the world. And between 1929, when the Great Depression happened, until the mid 1970s, social democracy and Keynesian economics, which was that branch of economics that got the world out of the Great Depression, was the dominant political philosophy of the day. And so you see, as the Chinese will tell you, the fortune goes round in a cycle, doesn't it? You can have political philosophies that come into fashion, and you can have philosophies that go out of fashion. But I can tell you, throughout the world now, neoliberalism is on the retreat. It is considered a reckless experiment that has failed. Failed terribly. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to take a 2-minute break now, okay? Because I see from a lot of comments from people that the streaming is laggy and that a lot of people cannot hear me clearly. So I ask you for your indulgence. Give me a 2-minute break and I will try and rectify the problem. Is that all right? Okay, thank you. What is the problem?
We are still here.